The Strait of Hormuz has once again become the center of the world's attention. But this time, the crisis unfolding in these narrow waters is unlike anything seen in decades. What was once a tense geopolitical pressure point has now transformed into the stage for one of the most dangerous military confrontations of the modern era. Global energy markets are trembling, warships are flooding into the Gulf, and the balance of power across the Middle East is shifting by the hour. For years, Iran treated the Strait of Hormuz as its ultimate bargaining chip. Every time sanctions tightened or international pressure increased, Tehran reminded the world that nearly 1/5 of the global oil supply passes through this narrow corridor. The message was always clear. If Iran could not freely export its oil, then no one in the Gulf would feel secure exporting theirs either. But according to reports emerging from the region, the situation has now crossed into entirely new territory. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the powerful military arm that controls much of Iran's regional strategy, allegedly placed multiple commercial vessels under direct threat while they were transiting the strait. Among the ships reportedly targeted was a South Korean-linked cargo vessel, a move that immediately triggered panic across Asia's energy and shipping industries. The moment neutral international shipping became part of the confrontation, the crisis stopped being just another regional standoff. It became a global emergency. The Strait of Hormuz is not simply a waterway. It is the beating heart of global energy trade. Every single day, massive oil tankers carrying crude oil and liquefied natural gas pass through these waters on their way to China, Japan, South Korea, India, and Europe. Any disruption here instantly impacts fuel prices, shipping costs, stock markets, and economic stability around the world. And when Iran allegedly escalated threats against commercial shipping, Washington responded with extraordinary speed. Under what has reportedly been described as Project Freedom, the United States began assembling one of the largest naval and aerial buildups the Gulf has seen in years. According to multiple reports and defense observers, the operation was designed not merely to escort ships through the strait, but to establish overwhelming military dominance over the entire region surrounding Hormuz. This was not a symbolic deployment meant for headlines. This was a message. Guided missile destroyers moved toward strategic choke points near the strait. Nuclear-powered submarines reportedly entered operational positions beneath Gulf waters. Fighter jets and surveillance aircraft filled the skies above the region. Thousands of troops were deployed to regional bases, while aircraft carriers and support fleets expanded America's military footprint across the Gulf. The goal was clear. The United States intended to guarantee freedom of navigation at any cost. And then came the first major test. According to claims circulating in defense and media reports, American naval destroyers escorting commercial traffic through the strait allegedly faced coordinated harassment involving drones, missiles, and swarms of fast attack boats linked to Iranian forces. The confrontation immediately became one of the most closely watched naval standoffs in recent memory. Yet, despite the pressure, the convoy reportedly completed its transit without sustaining major damage. That moment may have marked a turning point in the crisis, because modern warfare is no longer decided purely by numbers. It is decided by technology, information dominance, surveillance capabilities, electronic warfare, and speed of response. And in those areas, the gap between the United States military and Iran's naval forces remains enormous. Within hours, the Gulf reportedly transformed into one of the most heavily monitored military zones on the planet. American drones began conducting constant reconnaissance flights across the strait and surrounding coastlines. Advanced radar systems tracked movement across sea and air simultaneously. Electronic warfare aircraft reportedly jammed hostile communications and disrupted targeting systems. Satellites monitored strategic positions in real time. Below the surface, nuclear submarines armed with cruise missiles silently positioned themselves for rapid strike capability. Above the water, missile destroyers formed moving defensive walls around commercial shipping lanes. And in the air, the United States unleashed one of its greatest advantages: total aerial dominance. Fighter aircraft operating from Gulf bases and carrier strike groups maintained constant patrols over the strait. Armed drones circled key maritime corridors. Surveillance planes scanned for missile launches, mine deployments, or drone activity. Every suspicious movement was tracked within seconds. For decades, Iran's naval strategy relied heavily on asymmetric warfare. Rather than competing directly with larger navies, the IRGC invested in fast attack boats, naval mines, anti-ship missiles, drones, and swarm tactics designed to overwhelm enemies inside confined waterways like Hormuz. The strategy depended on chaos, surprise, and psychological pressure. But against a technologically superior force equipped with advanced surveillance networks and air superiority, those tactics suddenly became far riskier. Reports emerging from the region suggested that several Iranian-linked attack craft attempting to approach protected shipping lanes were intercepted or destroyed. Whether fully confirmed or not, the psychological impact of those reports spread rapidly across military circles and global media alike. Because wars are fought not only with weapons, they are fought with perception, morale, fear, confidence. The side that appears unstoppable often gains momentum long before the battlefield outcome is fully decided. And at the same time that military pressure intensified, the economic consequences began shaking the entire world. Oil markets reacted instantly to every new report from the Gulf. Insurance premiums for commercial vessels surged. Shipping companies began reconsidering transit routes. Investors feared supply disruptions. Energy importing nations across Asia moved into emergency planning discussions. Countries like Japan, South Korea, India, and China rely heavily on Gulf energy exports. Even temporary instability in Hormuz threatens manufacturing industries, transportation networks, and electricity systems across massive portions of the global economy. This is why the crisis escalated beyond a simple military confrontation. It became a battle over global economic stability itself. Meanwhile, Gulf nations found themselves directly on the front line of a potential regional war. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar all increased military readiness as tensions climbed higher. Air defense systems were activated. Critical infrastructure entered emergency status. Strategic coordination with Western allies intensified. And behind closed doors, governments across the region reportedly prepared for the possibility that the situation could spiral into open conflict at any moment. Because once large numbers of military forces converge in a narrow strategic area, even a single mistake can ignite catastrophe. One missile fired accidentally, one drone crossing into restricted airspace, one naval collision in darkness. That is all it could take. And according to analysts, the next phase of the crisis could become even more dangerous. Military experts began discussing what American escalation might look like if Iran continued threatening shipping routes. Potential targets mentioned in strategic discussions reportedly included missile depots, naval bases, drone facilities, coastal radar systems, command centers, and military infrastructure connected to operations in the Gulf. Many of these facilities are believed to be heavily fortified or hidden underground. But modern bunker-busting munitions and precision-guided weapons are specifically designed to destroy hardened targets once considered nearly untouchable. Military strategists have long argued that any major conflict involving Iran would likely begin with a massive suppression campaign aimed at crippling communications, radar coverage, air defenses, and missile launch capability within the first hours. The logic is simple. Blind the enemy, disrupt coordination, destroy launch capability, and prevent effective retaliation before it can begin. Cruise missiles launched from submarines and destroyers could theoretically strike dozens of targets simultaneously. Electronic warfare aircraft could jam communications across entire regions. Cyber operations might target military infrastructure and command systems at the same time. The opening hours of such a conflict would likely determine the entire course of the war. But military confrontation is only one dimension of the crisis. The economic pressure building against Iran could become equally devastating. Iran's economy relies heavily on maritime trade and energy exports. Any prolonged disruption to shipping routes or oil sales places enormous strain on the country's financial system. Currency instability, inflation, shortages, and unemployment can rapidly intensify under those conditions. And history repeatedly shows that wars are often decided not only on battlefields, but inside economies. A country can possess missiles, drones, and military manpower, but if supply chains collapse, fuel becomes scarce, and revenue disappears, sustaining prolonged conflict becomes increasingly difficult. This is why naval blockades have historically been among the most powerful tools in warfare. A blockade isolates, exhausts, and slowly squeezes a nation's economic lifelines without requiring a full-scale invasion. According to reports tied to this scenario, the United States and allied naval forces effectively established heavily protected transit corridors through Hormuz, while simultaneously tightening control over hostile maritime movement. Commercial vessels continued moving only under intense security protection. The strategic objective extended beyond protecting shipping. It was about controlling the flow of global commerce through one of the world's most important waterways. And in today's world, whoever controls trade routes controls influence. Yet despite overwhelming military superiority, the risks facing Washington remain enormous. Iran possesses significant regional influence through allied militias and proxy networks operating across multiple countries. Any major escalation in the Gulf could trigger retaliatory attacks far beyond Hormuz itself. Rocket strikes on military installations, drone attacks targeting energy infrastructure, cyber attacks against financial systems, regional destabilization, all remain serious possibilities in any expanding conflict. This is why military planners consistently warn that wars in the Middle East rarely stay confined to one battlefield. Every strike creates ripple effects. Every escalation introduces new risks, and every miscalculation can pull additional actors into the confrontation. One of the most controversial possibilities discussed by analysts involves strategic energy infrastructure inside the Gulf itself. Oil export facilities, offshore platforms, and port infrastructure represent some of the most economically critical assets connected to Iran's economy. Damage to these facilities could severely impact export capacity and government revenue. But attacks on energy infrastructure carry global consequences as well. Oil prices could skyrocket within hours. Global inflation could worsen dramatically. Financial markets could plunge into panic. Supply chains, already under pressure, could face further disruption. That is why any serious military confrontation in Hormuz immediately becomes a worldwide concern. Another major focus of speculation involves the possibility of special military operations targeting strategic islands or heavily fortified naval positions in the Gulf. Military analysts have long debated whether elite amphibious forces could rapidly seize critical maritime infrastructure during a high-intensity conflict. Such operations would involve helicopters, drones, naval gunfire support, precision strikes, and rapid deployment units operating under extremely dangerous conditions. But amphibious assaults remain among the most difficult military operations ever attempted. Mines, missiles, coastal defenses, artillery, drone swarms. Any of these threats could turn a landing operation into chaos within minutes, and any attempt to seize strategic energy infrastructure would send shockwaves through the global economy, unlike anything seen in recent years. At the same time, another battlefield has become just as important as the sea and sky above Hormuz: information warfare. In the modern world, controlling narratives matters almost as much as controlling territory. Every side in a conflict fights not only with military force, but with media campaigns, strategic messaging, and online influence operations. One side presents itself as defending international trade and freedom of navigation. The other presents itself as resisting foreign pressure and defending national sovereignty. Social media platforms flood with dramatic footage, conflicting claims, military analysis, and propaganda from every direction. And because information now spreads globally within seconds, public perception can shift almost instantly. A single video can influence international opinion overnight. A leaked image can trigger diplomatic crises. An unverified report can shake financial markets within minutes. The battlefield no longer exists only in physical space. It exists online, 24 hours a day, across the entire planet. As the crisis deepens, diplomacy becomes both more urgent and more fragile. Because despite aggressive rhetoric and military buildups, nearly every major power understands the catastrophic consequences of a full-scale war in the Gulf. The Middle East contains some of the most important energy infrastructure on Earth. Any prolonged conflict would damage not only regional economies, but potentially the global economic system itself. This is why back-channel negotiations, intelligence contacts, and diplomatic mediation often continue even during periods of extreme military tension. Publicly, leaders may appear uncompromising. Privately, negotiations may already be underway. History contains many moments where nations approach the edge of war before stepping back at the final second. But history also contains moments where miscalculations changed the world forever. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes the Strait of Hormuz so dangerous. The waterway is narrow, the military presence is massive, the stakes are global, and the margin for error is terrifyingly small. Both sides face immense pressure. For the United States, failing to secure commercial navigation could damage credibility with allies and weaken confidence in American military power. For Iran, backing down completely after years of resistance rhetoric could create internal political pressure and strategic humiliation. That creates one of the most dangerous dynamics in geopolitics. Two sides both feeling they cannot afford to appear weak. And when military power, economic survival, political pressure, and national pride collide in the same location, the world pays attention. Because the consequences would not stop in the Gulf. Ordinary people across the planet would feel them immediately. fuel prices rising, food transportation costs increasing, airline tickets becoming more expensive, manufacturing industries slowing, global markets reacting to every new headline. This is why the Strait of Hormuz matters so much. It is not merely a regional issue. It is one of the central arteries of the global economy. Any instability there affects billions of people far beyond the Middle East itself. And perhaps that is the most dangerous reality of all. A crisis beginning in a narrow strip of water could reshape global politics, military alliances, energy strategies, and economic systems for years to come. Countries may accelerate investments in alternative energy routes. Governments may increase defense spending. Nations may rethink their dependence on vulnerable maritime choke points altogether. In many ways, crises like this expose how interconnected the modern world truly is. Because when one narrow waterway carries such enormous importance, instability there becomes a global threat. Now the world watches carefully. Will diplomacy succeed before tensions spiral further? Will military deterrence prevent open war? Or could one mistake ignite a conflict far larger than anyone expects? Those questions may ultimately determine not only the future of the Gulf, but the future balance of power across the entire international system. One thing is absolutely certain. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most dangerous and strategically critical places on Earth. And whenever tensions explode there, the entire world feels the shockwaves. So what do you think? Will overwhelming military pressure force Iran toward negotiations? Or could escalation trigger a conflict that spreads far beyond the Gulf itself? And if the crisis spirals out of control, would the global economy survive the shockwaves that follow? Share your thoughts below. And if you enjoy deep geopolitical analysis, military strategy breakdowns, and global conflict documentaries, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more.